Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back. I'm your host, Cardmaster Phoenix, here as always, and today I'm going to be starting a video series in which I go through all of the core set cards, the Path of Arthas mini set cards, and all of the class cards, one class at a time for each of the now 11 classes in Hearthstone for the upcoming, or now at the time of recording this video, now live, March of the Lich King expansion, giving my thoughts on the cards, any insights I can offer for them, as well as a star review solidifying my overall evaluation and interpretation of the cards, as is tradition with most Hearthstone content creators during reveal season. Before we begin, I'd like to apologize for these videos being late. I'd initially recorded my reviews of most of the cards, but I didn't like how they turned out, so I decided it would be easier for me to just remake the videos rather than do all the editing required to make them as good as I want them to be. Which, judging by the length of this 20-page video script, probably isn't true anymore, but that's besides the point. I also know with this being a revised review, and obviously with this review being released after the expansion, it would be fairly easy for me to simply audit any incorrect opinions I had on cards, but I'm not going to do that here. I'm treating this review as though it were being published prior to the set's release, and I personally guarantee you my opinions and ratings won't be biased or otherwise negatively impacted and or influenced by having played them since then, although a few times throughout the video I do use that knowledge to give my personal opinions on cards seen play that I think shouldn't be. One last note before we start, I did actually base my opinions of the cards off how likely I think any given rune is to see play, and obviously the more runes a card requires, the less decks it will be able to be running, thus meaning there's less play that it's going to see. And I took that into consideration with giving my star ratings. The primary example of this is I personally believe, although the community seems to largely disagree with me on this, that Frost is the weakest of the three rune types, because in my opinion, the cards contained therein are slightly worse on average compared to Blood and Unholy, so I usually dock a star or two for Frost rune cards specifically with that context, and usually one for multiple rune requirement cards if the card isn't good enough to make up for it. You may very well and absolutely are welcome to disagree with me on this, but it's how I feel, and I felt it's only right to be transparent with you guys up front. With all that having been said, let's get into the review. Starting off with the Death Knight core set, we have a total of 32 cards in the core set, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. First off, we have Body Bagger, which is a common 1-mana 1/3 undead with Battlecry Gain a Corpse. This card is pretty bad. This stat line is pretty common nowadays for 1-cost units, but unfortunately the Bagger doesn't really do anything. I imagine it'll be pretty easy to generate the corpses you'll need throughout any given game just by playing the board and making trades, so unless you're really needing to capitalize on stockpiling corpses from the very get-go, this likely won't see any play. 1 star. Next up we have Heartstrike, a 1-mana common card that has a prerequisite of 1 blood rune that deals 3 damage to a minion, and if that kills it, you gain a corpse. This, I think, is really good, and the flavor text Love Hurts is really fitting. I think this is pretty cool, and I could very well see people splashing 1 blood rune solely for the purpose of being able to run this card in the decks. First off, a 1-mana 3 deal 3 is as good as it gets for the cost, except it can't go face. I mean, this does everything you could possibly want a 1-mana removal spell to do. It gets rid of something, it generates a corpse which actively advances your game plan. This card's great. This will probably see play in just about every Death Knight deck that's running Blood, 5 stars. After that, we have Noxious Cadaver, a 1-mana 1/2 undead minion. It's a rare, and it has Battlecry deal 2 damage to an enemy and your hero with a requirement of 1 blood rune. First off, it does say to an enemy, not a minion, so you can send it face if you want it to. That's a mark in its favor. Playability-wise, this card seems fine. A 1/2 for 1 is just below average for its cost, and the effect could pretty reliably function as a way to pave off the last bit of health of a straggling enemy minion on its last legs, so this should be okay. I'm going to give it 3 stars because I anticipate blood runes to be the most popular of the 3 rune types, and as I just said, this likely could kill something, provided of course you run some of your other minions into it or hit it with something like a Heartstrike afterwards. Following that, we have Plagued Grain, a 1-mana rare that requires triple Unholy, so you have to fully commit to it, meaning you couldn't run a card like Heartstrike on the same deck as this card in this case. And it generates 4 corpses, then shuffles 4 crates into your deck that each summons a 2/2 undead when drawn. First off, it goes without saying this is easily going to be the best, most efficient way to start piling on your corpses for later on in the game, which explains why it's triple Unholy. but I question if this will be worth locking yourself out of 2/3 of the Death Knight cards just to have this kind of effect. Don't get me wrong, I've already conceded it's startlingly effective at bulking up your corpse counter, but I can't help but wonder if the strict prerequisite will hold it back to the point of negatively impacting its viability. I'm going to give it 4 stars because of how steep of a price you have to pay in order to gain access to it, but definitely don't underestimate this card. You're going to be seeing lots of it. Not to mention with cards like Paris Scoundrel, School Teacher, and Venomous Scorpion being able to generate this in the Death Knight class. This is easily accessible even through cards and decks that aren't triple unholy. Next up we have Rune Forging, a 1-mana shadow spell that draws a weapon, and by spinning a corpse you reduce its cost by 1. That is cool. So it's a tutor for a very specific type of card, which is actually better in Hearthstone than just a generic tutor, because it virtually guarantees you get the exact card you're looking for off of it. 1 mana, so it's super efficient. It is Shadow School, so multicaster synergies. I mean, yeah. The only thing potentially holding this card back is there needs to be a weapon that's worth running in order to play it, but in the case where that's the reality, this is a 4-star card. Next up, we have Skello Sidekick. Love that name. And it's a 1-mana 1/2 common undead that has the battle cry, give a friendly undead +2 attack. The fact that it says just friendly undead and not another undead leads me to believe it can target itself, in which case it's a 1-mana 3/4, which is obviously amazing stats for cost. But what I think you'll actually be more likely to do is use this in conjunction with your hero power to buff your 1/1 charge ghoul into a 3/1 that likely trades, but has the option to go face if you want it to, effectively making this a 3-mana kill something, assuming you have the right board state, and that seems really good. This card is what I consider a sleeper card. Most people will probably overlook it, but I can certainly see its potential. Note it doesn't say until end of turn, so the increase is permanent if the minion lives past your turn. I also want to point out that there has historically been a lot of effects similar to this that makes the target random, so the fact you get to choose is really cool, and honestly, I believe this is a 4-star card. Maybe won't see play in every Death Knight deck, which is why I'm not opting to give it 5 stars, but I'm probably going to be playing it in most of my lists. Not bad. Continuing on, we have the Battlefield Necromancer, a 2-mana 2/3 with a double Unholy Rune requirement, and at the end of your turn, you raise a corpse as a 1/2 Risen Footman taunt. First off, the artwork is just incredible to me. To me, Hearthstone as a game is about the flavor. The fun and whimsical, yet at the same time also unique text both on the card and in the puns and references in the flavor text, as well as having the ability as a digital card game to have card designs and effects no paper TCG/CCG could ever possibly have. But the art on this is just badass. This could easily pass for a Magic the Gathering card art with the quality and vibe it gives off. It's important to note that the taunt bodies summoned off of this do not leave corpses behind, so you can't just spin the corpse to getting a quote-unquote guaranteed corpse right back on your opponent's turn. As far as the actual card goes, it's about as good as you'd expect a common to be. I'm not very impressed by it, 2 stars, which is a shame because again, I do really like the artwork. Next we have Bone Digger Geist, a 2-mana 2/2 rare undead that has a prerequisite of 1 Unholy Rune and Battlecry Spin the Corpse to gain +1/+2. This card is pretty bad too. 2 mana and a corpse for a 3/4 is okay, it's certainly efficient, but it's really held back by the fact it doesn't have rush or the ability to do anything immediately other than slightly augment its stats. This would be a lot better if it was +1/+1 in rush, but I probably wouldn't play this card. It's not awful, but it's not great. I'm giving this card 2 stars because while this is a good play on turns 3 and 4 if you have nothing better to do, especially since the ghoul from your hero power on turn 2 will generate the corpse needed to power this up, the card itself appears rather lackluster to me. Next on the list we have Defrost, our very first Frost Rune card with a requirement of 1 Frost Rune, and it's a 2-mana Frost spell that draws a card with the added text, spend 2 corpses to draw another. So for 2 mana and 2 corpses you draw 2 cards. This seems really good. Before we get into the actual review of the card, once again, just look at that artwork. Anyway, 2 mana is already about the average cost for generating a card, by looking at cards like Ignite, Ruined Orb, and Capture Cold Tooth Mine as examples, so it's at least average already, but the upside of drawing an extra card for the same mana cost is pretty insane. I think this will very often be a 2-mana draw too, and it's just strictly better than Arcane Intellect, which sees play in most current Mage decks. To see why this card is good, you gotta look at it from the perspective of, would you play this as a 2-mana draw 1? And I probably would. And then ask yourself if you're willing to spend 2 corpses to fuel the second draw. If that's worth it, in other words, and I'd say it is in most cases. So that means that this card is absolutely an all-star include in any Frost deck, and probably even most decks that aren't running Frost strictly just for the benefit of being able to have this card, such as a double blood 1 Frost deck. Looking at previous cards as points of comparison, Arcane Intellect is the 3-mana draw tool with a Spell School. This is a 2-mana draw 1 with a Spell School at base value, but can fairly reliably draw you an extra card on top of that. Now this certainly doesn't beat out cards like Cram Session, which was very often 2-mana draw 5. If you played with or against Mozaki Mage, you know what I'm talking about. But it's still really good in my opinion. On that note, I'm glad Death Knight is also gaining access to card draw because so many other classes have it built in. It would make Death Knight far less appealing if they didn't have it for sure. So I'm glad they're getting a card like this to help them catch up to the other classes. As for the rating, I'm going to give this card 4 stars because while it will undoubtedly see tons of play, I personally feel like Frost is the weakest of the 3 rune types, and the Blood and Unholy cards just feel slightly better on average when compared to the Frost rune cards, so this suffers a bit from that perspective. Next up we have Frost Strike, another 2-mana Frost spell that deals 3 damage to a minion, and if that kills it, you discover a Frost rune card. Double Frost rune requirement. I think this card is really good. I imagine the card pool for any given rune type, but especially Frost, judging from how we haven't seen many thus far, you'll be able to find the exact card you want very often. It does slightly depend on the average overall quality of Frost rune cards, but this absolutely sees 2 of play in every single Frost deck. I'm giving it 4 stars. Next up we have Harbinger of Winter, a 2-mana 2/2 undead with a Frost rune requirement of 2, and it has Death Rattle, draw a Frost spell. That's a sick name. I will say that it being a tutor for a very specific type of card is actually better in Hearthstone than a generic tutor, as weird as that may sound, because it limits the variety and amount of cards you can randomly draw from your deck, thus making you much more likely to get the one you need at that given moment. If there's a really good, meta-defining Frost spell, maybe, but that's such a specific use case, I don't know if people are really going to dedicate 2 of their 3 rune slots to Frost, just so they can have effectively another 2 copies of the card in their deck. Not sure how relevant Frost will be, because again, I personally feel Blood and Unholy will be much more commonly used, but this is an auto-include in Frost decks, so I'll give it 3 stars since it's not quite 4-star material to me. Next up we have Obliterate, a 2-mana epic rarity spell with a requirement of just 1 blood rune, surprisingly, and it simply says, destroy a minion your hero takes damage equal to its health. Yes, I know looking at the updated version it says destroy a minion, deal 3 damage to your hero, but that's because this card was actually buffed in the most recent balance patch literally yesterday. But again, if you recall, I am only counting and taking into consideration the versions of the cards as they were released. This is an amazing card, and even more so after the buff. Probably the best we've seen thus far. It's cheap, efficient removal that only requires 1 blood rune to use, and it doesn't have any stipulation on the minions it can kill. Easy 5 stars. Starting with this review, I'll be giving 1 card each class set review video I make a 6-star rating to really highlight its status above the others as being exceptionally good, and this is very easily in contention for earning that title this video. Next card. Anti-Magic Shell is our next card on the list, and it's a 3-mana shadow spell. It's rare with a single Unholy Rune requirement, and it says give your minions +1/+1 and can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. This card is insane. I've always brought this up whenever I see a card like this, but historically speaking, the can't be targeted by spells or hero powers text has been printed exclusively on 7+ mana cards. Evasive Draconid is a 7 mana card. Reliquary Prime is a 7 mana legendary card that's generated off another legendary, so you have to draw the base card, have it die, then wait until you draw/find the second version of this card for a slight increase in the flexibility of the effect. And Laughing Sister is a 2 mana card, but it's generated off of Ysera, which is a 9 mana card, whose entire purpose is being super expensive to give you incredibly good stats/effects for the cost. And now they're just putting it on 3 and 4 star cards, 3 and 4 mana cards, such as Clear Conscience and now the Anti-Magic Shell. Maybe that's just a symptom of power creep in Modern Hearthstone, but that's never going to sit right with me. And in my eyes, that's always would, or I guess now I should say, always should be reserved for expensive cards, but now it's being printed on 3 and 4 cost cards on a regular basis, which just baffles me. That being said, I'm only giving this card 4 stars because I also believe to a certain extent I could potentially be overvaluing this type of effect. Because right now in the game, we have tons of board clears that, like Blizzard and Flamespike, that does not target, that just straight up deals 2 to all enemy minions and freezes them, or deals 5 to all enemy minions without freezing them in the case of Flamestrike, without actually targeting them. Moving along, we have Chillfallen Baron, yet another card with sick artwork. And he's a 3 mana 2/2 undead with Battlecry and Death Rattle draw card. This doesn't even have a rune requirement, and it's 2 card draws in 1 on top of being a decent body. You know, this actually kind of makes that other card, Defrost, look pretty bad because it's runeless and guarantees you get 2 cards off of it in almost all cases, except for the niche scenarios where it gets silenced somehow, without requiring the whole corpse setup. Yeah, this is an easy 5 stars for me. Next up, we have Graveyard Shift, a 3 mana rare spell that summons 2 1/1 zombies with Reborn. Notably, they do actually drop corpses, so that's basically 4 corpses for 3 mana, except they don't have Rush, so it's on a fairly significant time delay, and only 1 Unholy Rune requirement. I mean, again, this card seems pretty okay to me, even with that. Notably, it does work pretty well at Corpse Explosion, because it will kill them off by using your first corpse. Then they will come back and regenerate because of Reborn and die again. So yeah, 4 stars. Continuing on, we have Brimefang Sword, a 3 mana 2 attack 3 durability weapon that reduces the cost of a random spell in your hand by 1 after you attack with it. Not bad. The double Frost Rune requirement is a bit of a large ask, but for the people willing to dive pretty deep in the Frost or fully commit to it, yeah, this is a staple. 4 stars. Following that, we have Yumurjar Deathbringer, a name that sounds like it should be reserved for a legendary unit, and it's a 3/3 undead with Taunt and Death Rattle. Spend 3 corpses to summon a 3/3 Risen Yumurjar with Taunt. This card is awful. It's double Unholy Rune requirement, so it's hard to splash for. It offers a very lackluster effect, and the body it generates doesn't even leave behind a corpse when you're spending 3 to make it. Yeah, this card's bad. 1 star. Moving along from that garbage, we have Deathstrike, a 4 mana common spell with 1 Blood Rune requirement. It has lifesteal, and it deals 6 damage to a minion. Gross. Worth noting, it does say a minion, so you can hero power summon a ghoul, send it face, then sack it to gain 6. This also basically single-handedly nullifies any life you will have lost from Obliterate, especially now with the new updated card text. So overall, this card is really, really strong. 5 stars. Next up, we have Grave Strength, a 4 mana shadow spell that gives all your minions +1 attack this turn, but by spending 5 corpses, you give them +3 instead. You know, because a Shaman and neutral 1 card OTK enabler just wasn't enough. Thankfully, you have to fully commit to Unholy to hard run it, but you can obviously get around it with cards like Venomous Scorpion and Volpera Scoundrel, with the only exception being School Teacher because they had the hopefully intentional foresight to make it cost 4, and School Teacher can only discover cards worth 3 or less. But yeah, this card really is just going to win you games if it comes up at the right time, or even if you just sit on it and wait to establish a board. I'm giving it 4 stars. Next up, we have Remorseless Winter, a 4-mana common Frost School spell that deals 2 to all enemies and draws you a card. This is decent, and from what I've seen thus far, it most certainly looks like Frost is where you want to be for card draw. But the actual card isn't great. It's certainly better than its contemporaries Consecration and Holy Nova, but a single Frost Ring requirement is all it takes to start weighing this card down. I don't think either of the other 2 aforementioned cards are particularly good, so this card's only real upside is that it replaces itself by drawing you a card. I've said multiple times in this video already that I heavily believe Blood and Unholy cards are better on average than Frost Ring cards, making it the least appealing of the 3 to me anyway, but this card is decent. I'm giving it 3 stars. Next, we have Repulsive Gargantuan, a 4-mana 3/6 undead with 1 Frost Ring requirement that prevents enemy characters from being healed. This is certainly an interesting effect, and if something like Triple Blood Death Knight Control starts to dominate the meta, this will be a pretty good tech card against that, but the card itself I find rather lackluster. The body's nice, but not much else to discuss from there. 2 stars. Here we have Thessarian, a 4-mana 3/3 undead legendary for the Death Knight class with a single Frost Ring requirement with Reborn, Battlecry, and Death Rattle deal 2 damage to a random enemy. This card sucks, and for how much I've seen it in my games since the expansion's release, it's super overrated. 1 star. Following that, we have Army of the Dead, a 5-cost shadow spell with double Unholy Rune requirement to raise up to 5 corpses as 2/2 Risen Ghouls at Rush. So this is basically Death Knight's skill with Nixia, and I think it does an okay job for what it's worth. Just as a quick side note, any Risen card doesn't leave behind a corpse when it dies, which makes sense because then this card would be absolutely broken. But I still think it will still see play, especially if you can reduce its cost. Also rivals Corpse Explosion for Blood Death Knight, albeit it goes about clearing the board in a slightly different way. I'm giving this card 4 stars. Continuing on, we have Deathbringer Saurfang, a 5-mana 3/5 legendary undead with Taunt and Death Rattle. Return this to your hand, it costs health instead of mana. Okay, so Mana Cheat is always really strong, and this card by itself is a source of infinite minion generation. I think this card's pretty good since Blood Death Knight has tons of ways to gain access to multiple copies of Vampiric Blood and increase the health to a metric fuck ton, so you'll likely always be able to afford the 5 life overhead. So 4 stars for me. Next up we have Possessifier, a 5-mana 3/3 uncommon with Battlecry summon 2 1/1 fighters that rush and reborn. Do note that since they're not risen, they will leave behind corpses, and also keep in mind that after you trade them in, the reborn bodies will also have rush, so it's effectively 5 mana deal 4, plus generate 4 corpses, possibly fueling Denathrius and or any other infused synergy cards you have as well too. Also only a single Unholy Rune requirement, so this card's super good. 5 stars, auto include in all Unholy decks, and probably worth splashing for in most cases. Next we have Rhyme Sculptor, a 5-mana 3/3 undead spooky scary skeleton boy, and he has Battlecry summon 2 2/1 Rhyme Elementals with Death Rattle, deal 2 damage to a random enemy. This card is what that shitty legendary should have been. 5 mana for 7/5 in stats, with upside and infusion synergies. This is pretty good even with a Frost Ring requirement. 4 stars. Now we have the Corrupted Ashbringer, a 6 cost, 5 attack, 2 durability weapon with lifesteal and 2 blood runes as a prerequisite. This is pretty cool. It's obviously very reminiscent of the OG Ashbringer, which is automatically equipped when Tyrion Fordring bit the dust, but the lifesteal and 2 swings per copy means this will put a 10 life gap between you and your opponent per attack. This is really good. 3 stars. I will say I think it sees a bit too much playing constructed for what it's worth, but this is easily an amazing arena card. I also do like the playful flavor text stating, put your faith in the blight as opposed to put your faith in the light. Very nice touch. I love small details like that. Very simplified text too, very rare to see in modern Hearthstone. Moving on, we have Gnome Muncher, a 6-mana 5/6 undead with taunt and lifesteal, and at the end of your turn, it attacks the lowest health enemy, which can include your opponent's hero if they're super low. 1 Blood Rune requirement. Do note that this actually bypasses the frozen status, so even if it gets iced by a wind chill or flurry, blizzard, what have you, it still does a good job gaining your life and removing a body. Just another one of the numerous ways Death Knight has to gain life and self-sustain. 5 stars. The last 4 cards we have here, starting with Overseer Frigidara, a 6-mana 5/6 legendary minion with double Frost Rune requirement, and it has Battlecry. Use an amazing play animation. Draw 2 spells. If they're both Frost, deal 2 damage to all enemies. So built-in Remorseless Winter, plus an extra card, plus the decent body, especially for the cost. Yeah, this is okay. 3 stars. I wasn't kidding about what I said, though. She does have one of the cleanest animations I've ever seen. Seriously, go play a game with her and see for yourself. Shit's sick. Moving on to a Blood Rune legendary, we have Patchwork, whom you may recognize from the solo adventure. He's back in the game as a collectible card this time, and he's just as much of a nuisance in play as he was as an AI opponent. He's a 4/6 legendary undead with Battlecry, Make Mutants Cry. Getting back on track though, he burns a random minion in your opponent's hand, deck, and on their battlefield. This card is disgusting, and the fact he only has a requirement of 1 Blood Rune is almost as terrible as it is miraculous Blizzard gave him a rune requirement at all. Starting with this review moving forward, I'm going to give one card out for every review, 1 card from here on out, every review video, a 6-star rating to highlight how exceptionally broken they are and solidify the fact they stand head and shoulders above their competition. And Patchwork, spoiler alert to no one's surprise, is my 6-star entry for this review. Absolutely bananas. Now for the Unholy Legendary, we have Lord Marigar, an 8-mana 9/7 legendary undead with a triple Unholy Rune requirement. With the Battlecry, raise all your corpses as 1/1 Risen Ghouls of Rush, and then for each that can't fit, give 1+2/+2. Talk about a game ender. If you play this and your opponent doesn't Theater Mutinous Patchwork it, you're almost guaranteed to win the game on your next turn. This is the very definition of a payoff card. It takes the game plan you've been dedicated to all game and accumulates it all into one huge tempo swing, and in most cases outright ends the game on your following turn if the minions stick. This card looks sick, and even the name is badass. 5 stars. Finally, we have Stitch Giant, a return to a fun classic minion design. Big, expensive to dummy, thick golem that gets gradually cheaper over the course of the game, or is just free if you draw it late. This one in particular, though, is a 10-mana 8/8 undead that costs 1 less for each corpse you spent this game. Not bad, 3 stars. Well, now that I've finally reviewed all the cards, given my thoughts and star ratings on them, and wrote out the 20-page long script after 2.5 weeks of development, it's time to quickly recap each card's rating in a rapid-fire manner. Bodybagger is a 1-star card. Heartstrike is a 5-star card. Noxious Cadaver is a 3-star card. Plagued Grain is a 4-star card. Rune Forging is a 3 or 4-star card, depending on if there's a weapon worth running. Skeletal Sidekick is a 4-star card. Battlefield Necromancer is a 2-star card. Bone Digger Geist is a 2-star card. Defrost is a 4-star card. Frost Strike is a 4-star card. Harbinger of Winter is a 3-star card. Obliterate is a 5-star card. Anti-Magic Shell is a 4-star card. Chillfallen Baron is a 5-star card. Graveyard Shift is a 4-star card. Rhymefang Sword is a 4-star card. Imajar Deathbringer is a 1-star card. Death Strike is a 5-star card. Grave Strength is a 4-star card. Remorseless Winter is a 3-star card. Repulsive Gargantuan is a 2-star card. Tessarian is a 1-star card. Army of the Dead is a 4-star card. Deathbringer Saurfang is a 4-star card. Possessifier is a 5-star card. Rhyme Sculptor is a 4-star card. Corrupted Ashbringer is a 3-star card. Gnome Muncher is a 5-star card. Overseer of Frigidara is a 3-star card. Lord Marrowgar is a 5-star card. Stitch Giant is a 3-star card. And the 6-star card for this review is Patchwork. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching this video and supporting me in any manner you have, big or small, be it just watching this video, liking the video, commenting, sharing, subscribing, whatever you've done, big or small, I really appreciate it. And I know I don't usually do this, but I really, really hope you have appreciated this video. And if you do, please give it a like. I've already shown you guys that I typed out a 20-page script for this video and spent 2.5 weeks writing it out, and not to mention the past 5 days making probably literally 3 or 4 dozen takes just trying to get the video to where I want it to be. So with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. I have been your host, Cardmaster Phoenix, signing out. See you guys next time. Have a good one.